October 15th, 1962, exactly at 3 p.m., a woman named Emily Carter walked into Padre Pio's cell at a spiritual retreat center, carrying a single white rose. She didn't say a word. She simply placed the rose at the foot of the crucifix and burst into tears. Padre Pio looked at her and said something that would change not only Emily's life, but would reveal one of the most powerful spiritual secrets about depression, a secret that the Vatican had kept silent for decades. He said, "Saint Teresa is waiting for you, has been waiting for you for 15 days, and she will set you free in 15 days from today. But there's a condition that no one has told you about. I'm going to reveal that condition to you and explain why October 15th at 3 p.m. is the most powerful gateway of the year to break free from spiritual depression. But first, you need to understand what Padre Pio discovered in 1946, that the Vatican tried to suppress for 16 long years. The depression you feel isn't just psychological. Padre Pio knew this. He saw it. He saw the spiritual burden weighing down souls. And Saint Teresa of Avila, who lived 4 centuries before him, had left behind a method so simple, so powerful, that the Church itself was afraid to share it. Why? Because it worked too quickly. And when something spiritual works that fast, it's questioned, investigated, silenced. But today, October 15th, is the one day of the year when this gateway opens completely, and I'm going to show you exactly what to do at 3 p.m. and what will happen over the next 15 days if you do it correctly. But there are 3 fatal mistakes that 90% of people make. And if you make even one of them, not only will this spiritual practice not work, your sadness could actually deepen. Padre Pio warned about this in 1964, but nobody listened. So, let's take this slowly, because this story has layers. And each layer you uncover brings you closer to liberation, or further away from it, if you don't pay attention to the details. Saint Teresa, she's very specific. She doesn't accept rushing. She doesn't accept doubt. She accepts surrender. And Padre Pio knew exactly how to translate that surrender into action. Let me tell you what happened to Emily, because her story is the key to understanding what will happen to you if you undertake this spiritual practice today. Emily Carter was 42 years old in 1962. She was from a small town in upstate New York, a mother of 3, married for 18 years, and for the past 7 years, she had woken up every day with a weight in her chest, a weight she described as a black hole. It wasn't ordinary sadness, it was emptiness, an emptiness so profound that she couldn't cry, couldn't pray, couldn't feel God. She tried everything: doctors, psychiatrists, medication. Nothing worked. Her family started to whisper, started to say she was possessed, that she needed an exorcism, but it wasn't possession, it was something worse. It was spiritual abandonment. Padre Pio called it the dark night of the soul, a dark night without purpose, without transformation, just darkness. And it was in September of 1962 that a friend of Emily's, who had visited the retreat center, came back with a strange message. She said, "Padre Pio asked me if I knew anyone who had been suffering from deep sadness for 7 years, and when I mentioned you..." He stopped. He looked at me and said, "She needs to come here on October 15th, exactly at 3 p.m., with a white rose. And she needs to place that rose at the feet of Saint Teresa, not at my feet, at the feet of Saint Teresa." Emily was confused. Why Saint Teresa? She always prayed to Padre Pio, to the Blessed Mother, to Saint Michael. But Saint Teresa? She barely knew her story. And why a rose? Why the 15th? Why exactly at 3 p.m.? These questions consumed her for 3 weeks. But something inside her, A very small, very faint voice said, "Go." And so she went. When Emily arrived at the retreat center on October 14th, the day before, she couldn't sleep. She stayed in the chapel all night. And at 3 a.m., something happened that she would never forget. She smelled the fragrance of roses. But there were no roses in the chapel. It was winter. It was cold, and the perfume was so strong. She looked around, thinking someone had brought flowers, but there was no one there, only her and the fragrance. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but with her heart. A female voice, soft but firm. The voice said, "The number 15 is no accident. It is the stairway. 15 steps to climb out of the darkness. 15 steps that I descended to find you. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. You begin to climb, but you need to give me permission. You need to place the rose, and you need to say yes." Emily broke down. She wept for the first time in 7 years, tears that seemed to wash away something very old, very heavy. And when dawn broke, she went to the local market and bought a white rose, the simplest one she could find, and she waited until 2:45 p.m. Then she walked toward Padre Pio's cell. When she entered, Padre Pio was praying the rosary. He didn't look at her. He just kept praying. Emily stood there, holding the rose, not knowing what to do, and then, exactly at 3 p.m., the church bell rang 15 times, and at the exact moment of the last chime, Padre Pio stopped praying. He looked at Emily and said the phrase I told you at the beginning. "Saint Teresa has been waiting for you for 15 days, and she will set you free in 15 days from today." Emily placed the rose at the foot of the crucifix, as she had been instructed. And Padre Pio said, "Now listen carefully to what you need to do, because Saint Teresa is precise. She doesn't work with vague symbolism. She works with loving obedience. And if you obey, the depression will break in 15 days. But if you doubt, if you test, if you do it halfway, the darkness will deepen, because you will be rejecting the hand that has reached down to pull you up." Padre Pio then handed Emily a small piece of paper, and on that paper, written by hand, was the protocol that I'm going to reveal to you now. But first, you need to understand why Saint Teresa and why the number 15, because without this understanding, the spiritual practice becomes mechanical. And what is mechanical cannot break depression. It only strengthens the prison. Saint Teresa of Avila died on October 15th, 1582, exactly at 3 p.m. That is no coincidence. Nothing in the lives of the saints is a coincidence. Teresa spent the last 15 years of her life in deep purification. She described in her writings that she went through 15 stages of darkness before reaching mystical union with God. 15 stages. And she promised, before she died, that she would help any soul who was going through the dark night. But she set one condition. The condition is this: you need to choose to climb. Spiritual depression isn't an illness that can be cured with medicine. It's a prison that can be opened with a key. And the key is willpower, but not prideful willpower, surrendered willpower. You need to say, "Saint Teresa, I can't do this alone. I choose to climb, but you need to carry me." And that choice, that decision, needs to be made on October 15th at 3 p.m. Why? Because that's when the veil between heaven and earth is at its thinnest. It's at that moment that Saint Teresa of Avila can descend those 15 steps and find you at rock bottom. But here's the detail that most people miss. Padre Pio told this to Emily Carter, and Emily told me. Back in 1982, just months before she passed, he said, "The rose, It isn't an offering. The rose is you. When you place that rose at the feet of Saint Teresa, you're saying, I am this flower, fragile, severed from its roots, but still capable of exuding fragrance if someone places me in living water. And Saint Teresa, she is that living water. She will place you in God's care, but you must accept being carried. So what happened with Emily? For the first 3 days, nothing. She went back to her small town in upstate New York, returned to her home, and the emptiness persisted. She began to doubt, started to think she'd been deceived, that Padre Pio had only said that to console her. But on the 3rd day, early in the morning, she awoke to the scent of roses. Again. And this time there was a white rose in her bed, a fresh rose, dewy with moisture, and she absolutely knew that she hadn't placed that rose there, and her husband, who slept beside her, hadn't seen anything. Emily picked up the rose, and she felt something different. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was hope, a very small hope. But it was something, and she decided to trust, decided to wait the full 15 days. And with each passing day, something shifted. On the 5th day, she was able to cry again. On the 7th day, she could feel the sun on her face and not feel disgusted by the light. On the 10th day, she prayed the Our Father, completely, without feeling like the words were empty. And on the 15th day, exactly 15 days after October 15th, she woke up, and the black hole, it was gone. It wasn't explosive happiness. It wasn't ecstasy. It was peace, a deep peace. A peace she described as being home, after 7 years lost in the desert. And she knew that Saint Teresa had descended those 15 steps, had found her at the bottom, and had carried her up on her back. But the story doesn't end there, because Padre Pio knew that Emily wasn't the only one. He knew there were thousands of Emilys out there in the world, and he started to tell others about this method, but always in silence, always in secret, because the Church at that time was investigating mystical phenomena with a lot of distrust. And Padre Pio didn't want Saint Teresa's method to be labeled as mere superstition, so he would say something like this: don't tell modern priests, don't tell rationalist theologians, tell it only to souls who are at rock bottom, souls who have tried everything, souls who have given up on themselves, because these are the souls that Saint Teresa seeks. Not those who are merely curious, not those who are experimenting, but those who are desperate, those who are dying on the inside. And that's how the method spread, by word of mouth, from soul to soul, and always with the same warning. You must do it on October 15th, exactly at 3 p.m., and you must choose to ascend, because Saint Teresa doesn't force. Saint Teresa invites, and the invitation expires in 24 hours if you don't respond on the 15th. You have to wait a year, and a year, when you're at the bottom of the well, is an eternity. But here's a detail that few people know. Padre Pio revealed this to a small group of Capuchin friars in 1966. He said, Saint Teresa has a hierarchy of priorities. She attends to mothers first. Why? Because the depression of a mother sinks an entire family, destroys the children, destroys the marriage, and spreads darkness for generations. So if you're a mother and you're listening to this, know that Saint Teresa is watching you, and she will prioritize you if you do this spiritual practice today. But there are 3 fatal mistakes, and I need to tell you about them now, because if you make even one of them, the spiritual practice not only fails, it reveals something about you that will force you to confront it. And not everyone is ready for that confrontation. Padre Pio said, when Saint Teresa descends to find you, she sees everything. She sees the hidden sins. She sees the guarded grudges. She sees the cherished revenges. And if you aren't willing to let those things go, she won't carry you. She waits, and her waiting can feel like absence. Mistake number 1, placing the rose without confessing. Padre Pio was clear. If you have an unconfessed mortal sin, Saint Teresa will not descend. She cannot. Because God respects freedom, and mortal sin is you saying no to God. So how will Saint Teresa carry you to God if you're saying no? She won't force it. She will wait for you to repent. And in the meantime, the depression continues and deepens, because now you know there's a way out, but you're choosing to stay. Mistake number 2, doing the spiritual practice without forgiving someone. This one is fatal. Padre Pio said that in 1963. A woman from Naples did the practice. She placed the rose, she prayed, but she harbored a deep resentment towards her sister. A resentment of 12 years, and in the following 15 days, instead of improving, she got worse. She began to have nightmares about Saint Teresa. She dreamed that Saint Teresa reached out to her, extended her hand, but when she tried to take it, the hand disappeared, and she would wake up screaming. She returned to Padre Pio in despair. And he looked at her and said, "You don't want to ascend. You want to be carried without letting go of the weight. And Saint Teresa doesn't do that. Either you forgive your sister and drop the weight, or you stay at the bottom, because the weight you carry is greater than her strength." And the woman cried for days, until she finally wrote a letter to her sister, asked for forgiveness, and the next day, the depression began to dissolve. Mistake number 3, doubting during the 15 days. This one is the most common. People do the spiritual practice, place the rose, pray, and expect to feel something immediately, and when they don't feel it, they doubt, and when they doubt, they cut the rope. Saint Teresa was descending to find them, but they released the rope. And then the depression returns with double the force, because now it's depression with hopelessness. The person thinks, even Saint Teresa couldn't help me, and that's a lie from hell. Padre Pio used to say, doubt isn't a sin, doubt is a temptation. And during those 15 days, the devil will try to make you doubt. He will whisper, "It's not working. You've been deceived. This is superstition." And you need to respond to that whisper with silence. Don't argue with the devil. Just say, "I have chosen to trust, and I will wait the full 15 days. And then, wait, even if nothing changes in the first 14 days, wait until the 15th, because Saint Teresa works in layers, and the last layer is the deepest. Now let me tell you another case, because Emily wasn't the only one. In 1965, a man named Robert Alves from Sao Paulo, Brazil, did the ritual. Robert was a doctor. He was a rationalist. He didn't believe in mysticism, but he was so mired in depression that he decided to try. He journeyed to a spiritual retreat center. On October 14th, 1965, and on the 15th at 3 p.m., he placed the rose. Padre Pio looked at him and said, "You don't believe in any of what you're doing. But Saint Teresa will teach you to believe, and it will be painful, because you need to unlearn before you can learn." And Robert left there thinking, "I wasted time and money. This is religious theater." But he decided to wait the 15 days, out of respect for the effort he'd made. On the 3rd day, Robert had a dream. He dreamed he was on a stairway of 15 steps, but the stairway was broken. 7 steps were missing in the middle, and he was at the bottom, looking up, knowing it was impossible to climb. And then a woman appeared. She was at the top, and she came down to him. She didn't fix the stairway. She picked him up in her arms and climbed with him. And when he woke up, He was crying, and he knew. He knew that Saint Teresa was real. Robert returned to his small town in upstate New York, and in the following 15 days he began to change. Not only did the depression leave, he changed as a person. He, who was a cold rationalist, began to see God in his patients. He began to pray before his surgeries, and he told me in a letter from 1978 that the spiritual practice of Saint Teresa not only cured his depression, it healed his soul. And he spent the rest of his life teaching this method to other doctors who suffered from burnout and existential emptiness. But now you must be wondering, what if I can't go to a spiritual retreat center? What if I don't have a statue of Saint Teresa? What if I don't know how to do it right? Padre Pio knew these questions, and he answered in 1967. He said, "It doesn't matter where you are. What matters is that you do it at 3 p.m. on the 15th of October, and that you have an image of Saint Teresa. It can be a photo, it can be a medal, it can be a rosary with her image. What matters is not the object, it's the intention. And the protocol is simple. Here's what you need to do today at 3 p.m. First, get a white rose. It has to be white, it can't be red, it can't be pink. White. Why? Because white is surrender, white is purity, white is a blank page for God to write on. If you can't find a white rose, it can be any white flower, but prefer a rose. Second, place the flower before an image of Saint Teresa. If you don't have an image, find one online, print it out, place it somewhere clean, an altar, a table. Don't leave it on the floor. Saint Teresa is a doctor of the Church. She deserves respect, and place the rose at the feet of the image, literally at her feet. Third, kneel. If you can't kneel for physical reasons, sit, but prefer to kneel. Because kneeling is bodily humility, and Saint Teresa responds to humility. And then pray this prayer. I'm going to give you the exact prayer. It's the same one that Padre Pio gave to Emily, and it's the same one that thousands of people have used in the last 60 years. Saint Teresa, doctor of the Church and teacher of prayer. I'm at the bottom of a well of sadness. I tried to climb out alone. I couldn't. Today, on the day that you entered heaven, at 3 p.m., I ask you, come down to me. Come down the 15 steps that I can't climb. Meet me where I am and carry me. I promise that I will let go of the weights that hold me back. I promise that I will forgive who I need to forgive. I promise that I will trust in the next 15 days, even if I don't feel anything, even if it seems like nothing is changing. I will wait, because I know that you have come down. I know that you are climbing with me on your back. And I know that on the 15th day, I will be at peace. Thank you, Saint Teresa. Thank you for not abandoning me. Amen. This prayer needs to be prayed with the heart, not just with the mouth. Padre Pio said, if you pray with your mouth and your heart is far away, Saint Teresa doesn't listen. She's not deaf. She just doesn't respond to those who are lying. So when you say, I will let go of the weights, you need to know what the weights are. When you say, I will forgive, you need to know who you need to forgive. And when you say, I will wait 15 days, you need to be committed to that wait. And after you pray, leave the rose there. Don't throw it away the same day. Leave it until the rose withers completely. Because while the rose withers, it symbolizes your death to sadness. And when the rose is completely dry, you bury it. Don't throw it in the trash. Bury it, preferably in a garden or in a pot with soil. And when burying it, you say, just as this rose returns to the earth, my sadness returns to the nothingness from which it came. And just as new life is born from the earth, new joy will be born from me. But there's more. Padre Pio gave an additional instruction that few know. He said, in the following 15 days, pray a rosary every day. It can be just one rosary. It doesn't have to be 3, but it needs to be every day. Why? Because the rosary is the rope. Saint Teresa is climbing with you on her back, but you need to hold the rope. And the rope is prayer. If you let go of prayer, you slide back down. And the rosary is the safest prayer, because it's the prayer of the Blessed Mother, and the Blessed Mother never lets anyone fall. And here's the sign. Padre Pio said, between the 3rd and 7th day, you will smell the scent of roses. It can be in the early morning. It can be during the day, but you will smell it. And when you smell it, give thanks out loud. Say, thank you, Saint Teresa. I know you are here, because this perfume is the confirmation. It's Saint Teresa saying, I have found you. I am climbing. Just hold on tight. But there are people who don't smell the perfume. And that doesn't mean that Saint Teresa hasn't come down. It means that Saint Teresa is working on a deeper level. And Padre Pio said, some perfumes are smelled by the nose, others by the heart. If you don't smell the physical perfume, pay attention to your heart. You will feel a peace, small, but new. A peace that wasn't there before. That is the perfume of the heart. And on the 15th day, something changes. It can be subtle, it can be dramatic, but it changes. Emily described it as if a fog had lifted. Robert described it as if a 50-pound weight had been lifted from his back. Another woman named Lisa from Chicago described it as if she had woken up from a 5-year coma. Each person feels it in a different way, but they all feel something, and they all know that it wasn't a placebo, it wasn't psychological, it was spiritual. But Padre Pio gave a final warning. He said, when Saint Teresa frees you, you have a responsibility. You need to tell other souls. At the bottom, you don't have to shout, you don't have to advertise, but when you find someone who is where you were, you tell them, you say, there is a way out. And the way out has a name, Saint Teresa, and the way out has a date, October 15th, and the way out has a time, 3 p.m. And if you can't do it today, because you only saw this after 3 p.m., Padre Pio said, if you miss the time, do it tomorrow. But know this. You'll need to wait until the next October 15th for the full gateway to open, but Saint Teresa can still help you if you act with faith. She isn't rigid, she's merciful. The exact hour isn't what matters. What's important is your willingness to ascend. But if you're hearing this at the right time, today, October 15th, and it's not yet 3 p.m., you have an opportunity that millions of people don't have. You have the chance to break free from depression at the right time, on the right day, at the right hour. And you're not hearing this by accident. Nothing is accidental. You're hearing this because Saint Teresa is already reaching down to you. She's already seen you. She's already chosen you. Now you need to choose her in return. Let me tell you about 3 more documented cases, because the more you understand the pattern, the easier it will be to recognize what's happening to you. The first is of Francis Martinez from Spain, 1968. Francis was 28 years old and had lost a child 3 years prior. The depression that followed the death of her child consumed her. She couldn't care for her other 2 children anymore. Her husband was desperate, and in October 1968, a neighbor told her about the spiritual practice of Saint Teresa. Francis was skeptical, but she was so desperate that she tried it. And for the first 10 days, nothing changed. She still woke up with a weight on her chest. She still felt like life had no meaning. But on the 11th day, she had a dream. In the dream, her deceased son appeared to her, and he said, "Mom, I'm okay. I'm with God. And Saint Teresa is bringing you closer to me. Not physically, but spiritually. You'll feel that I'm near, but you need to live, because my siblings need you." When Frances woke up, she cried. But it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief. And from that day on, the depression began to dissolve. On the 15th day, she woke up and was able to smile at her children for the first time in 3 years. And she wrote to me in 1980 saying, "Saint Teresa didn't erase the pain of loss, but she taught me to carry the pain without being crushed by it, and that is true healing." Second case, Mark Rossi, Italy, 1970. Mark was a successful businessman, but inside, he was empty. He had money, he had success, but he had no peace. He began to feel that life had no purpose, and in October 1970, he visited a spiritual retreat center out of tourist curiosity, and there he heard about Saint Teresa's spiritual practice. He laughed. He thought, that's for weak people, people who can't solve their problems on their own. But that night, Mark couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the phrase he'd heard. Saint Teresa reaches down for those at the bottom. And he realized he was at the bottom. But he was pretending he was at the top, and the next day, October 15th at 3 p.m., he did the spiritual practice, half ashamed, half disbelieving, but he did it. And in the 15 days that followed, something extraordinary happened. Mark began to feel gratitude for small things, the morning coffee, the sunshine, the laughter of an employee, things he'd never noticed before. And on the 15th day, he woke up and knew. He knew that success without God is empty, and that Saint Teresa had reached down to show him that. He sold his company, donated half the money to charity, and spent the rest of his life working with people suffering from depression. He died in 2005, and on his tombstone it's written, "Saint Teresa taught me how to live." Third case, Ana Silva, Brazil, 1975. Ana was 35 years old and a teacher. She had suffered from depression since adolescence. 20 years of profound sadness. She had attempted suicide 3 times, and in October 1975, she decided to try one last time. She read about Saint Teresa's spiritual practice in a letter a friend had sent from Portugal, and she thought, if this doesn't work, I give up. I'm going to end it all. Ana did the spiritual practice on the 15th, and for the first few days, as always, nothing. But on the 5th day, she felt something different. She was teaching class, and a student, an 8-year-old girl, looked at her and said, "Teacher, you smell like roses." Ana was confused. She wasn't wearing perfume. She didn't have flowers. And the girl said, "I don't know, but it smells like roses near you. It's very strong." Ana ran out of the school, went home, locked herself in her room, and cried, because she understood. Saint Teresa had reached down, and she was so close that even a child could sense it. And from that day on, Ana began to change. On the 15th day, the depression was gone, and she never attempted suicide again. She lived until 2018, and before she died, she wrote a testimony saying, "Saint Teresa didn't just save me from death. She taught me how to live." And that's the difference between healing and transformation. These 3 cases have something in common, and Padre Pio always pointed this out. He said, Saint Teresa doesn't heal you so you can go back to being who you were before. Saint Teresa heals you so you can become who God intended you to be. And sometimes that means your life will change completely. You might change jobs. You might move to a new city. You might end relationships that were making you sick. You might start projects you were putting off out of fear. Because when the depression is gone, you see clearly. And seeing clearly hurts. But it's the pain that liberates. And here's a secret that Padre Pio revealed in 1967 to a group of mothers who had done the spiritual practice. He said, "Have you noticed that you all felt the scent of roses at different times? One on the 3rd day, another on the 7th, another on the 10th. Why? Because Saint Teresa reaches down at the right time for each soul. She knows when you're ready to recognize that she's there, and she doesn't rush things. She waits for you to be ready." So, if you do the spiritual practice today and don't feel anything in the first few days, remember this: Saint Teresa is reaching down, but she's reaching down in her time, in God's time, not in your anxious time. And if you rush, if you demand signs, if you doubt because you haven't seen anything quickly, you'll push her away, not because she's proud, but because you're not surrendered. And Saint Teresa only works with surrender. Now, before I give you the final instructions, I need to tell you something important. This video you're watching didn't appear to you by chance. You're watching because you need to, because there's something inside you that's crying for help. And Saint Teresa heard that cry, and she used this video to reach you. This isn't marketing. This isn't manipulation. This is providence, and providence demands a response. If you feel that this video has touched you, if you feel that you need to do the spiritual practice, I ask you for one thing: hit the super thanks button down below. It's not about money. It's about commitment. When you hit that button, you're saying to heaven, "I heard, I recognize, I will act." And that act of commitment opens something spiritual. Because you're not just supporting a channel, you're saying yes to Saint Teresa of Avila. And she is waiting for that yes. Padre Pio used to say that there are 3 types of people who watch videos about faith: the curious, the skeptical, and the desperate. The curious watch and forget. The skeptical watch and criticize, but the desperate watch and act. And if you're still here, you're not just curious, you're not skeptical, you're desperate, you're at rock bottom, and you're looking for the stairway, and hitting that super thanks button. That's you saying, "I found the path, now I'm going to climb." And when you hit that button, something happens in the spiritual realm. You're not just supporting this work. You're becoming part of the chain of souls that Saint Teresa is rescuing. Because every time someone does the spiritual practice and is set free, they tell someone else. And that person tells another. And that chain has been growing since 1962, and you can be the next link. But you need to choose. You need to say yes. And super thanks is your visible yes. Now the final instructions. After you do the spiritual practice at 3 p.m. today, there are 7 things you need to do in the next 15 days. First, confess. If you have any unconfessed mortal sins, confess them in the first 3 days. Don't wait until the 15th day, because confession clears the channel. And if the channel is blocked, Saint Teresa can't get through. Second, forgive. Make a list of all the people you hold grudges against. It could be a small hurt. It could be a major betrayal. It doesn't matter. Write down their names, and next to each name, write, "I forgive." You don't have to feel forgiveness yet. Just write it, because forgiveness begins with the will. The feeling comes later, and when you write it, you're planting the seed of forgiveness, and Saint Teresa will water that seed. Third, pray a rosary every day. It could be in the morning, it could be at night, but don't skip a single day, because the rosary is the lifeline. And if you let go of the lifeline for even one day, you'll slip, And then you need to start all over again. And Padre Pio used to say, it's okay to start again, but it's harder, because the devil will use that day you skip to make you doubt everything. Fourth, avoid fights. During those 15 days, avoid arguments. Avoid social media that irritates you. Avoid toxic people, because every fight is a new weight, and Saint Teresa is trying to take away the old weights. If you keep adding new weights, she can't lift you up. It's like trying to carry someone who's clinging to rocks. Drop the rocks. Avoid the fights. Fifth, give thanks every day. Even if you don't feel gratitude, say thank you. Thank you for another day. Thank you for the food. Thank you for the bed. Thank you for Saint Teresa who is coming down to me. Because gratitude breaks the cycle of depression. Depression makes you focus on what's missing. Gratitude makes you focus on what's present. And when you give thanks, you invite God to fill the void. Sixth, fast once a week. It could be fasting from food. It could be fasting from the internet. It could be fasting from TV. But choose one day of the week and fast. Why? Because fasting is bodily surrender. It's you saying to your body, you don't control me. I control you, and I choose God above comfort. And Saint Teresa responds to fasting, because she was a master of fasting, and she recognizes those who are fasting. Seventh, prepare your testimony. On the 15th day, when the depression is gone, write down what happened. Write down the details. The day you smelled the fragrance. The day you were able to cry again. The day you felt peace. Write it all down. Because this testimony isn't for you. It's for the next person at rock bottom. And Saint Teresa will use your testimony to rescue another soul. And you will be part of the miracle. Not just receiving, but transmitting. And when the 15th day arrives, and you are free, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget rock bottom. Because many people are healed and forget. And when they forget, they go back. Not to the depths of depression, but to the depths of ingratitude. And ingratitude is a prison worse than depression, because in depression you ask for help. In ingratitude you think you don't need anyone, and when you think you don't need anyone, you fall again. So, keep the dried rose. Keep it as a reminder. Put it in a visible place. And every time you look at it, remember. Remember that you were at rock bottom. Remember that Saint Teresa came down. Remember that you promised to tell other souls. And tell them. Don't be ashamed. Because shame is disguised pride, and pride prevents miracles from multiplying. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't have depression, why am I listening to this? I'll tell you why. You're listening because you know someone who does. Someone in your family, someone at work, someone at church, someone who is suffering in silence. And Saint Teresa used you to reach that person. So share this video. Send it to whoever needs it. Don't wait. Because if the person is at rock bottom, they may not have the strength to search. You need to bring the stairway to them. And let me tell you the last case, the most important one, the case that ties everything together. In September of 1968, a month before he died, Padre Pio was in his cell. He was very weak. He could barely speak. And a young friar came in and asked, Padre, what is the greatest miracle you have ever seen in your life? And Padre Pio answered in a weak voice, the greatest miracle is not healing the body. The greatest miracle is healing the soul that has given up on God. And Saint Teresa performs this miracle every day, since 1582, and will continue doing so until the last day of the world. The friar asked, and how can people receive this miracle? And Padre Pio said, they only need to do one thing. Place the rose on the 15th day at 3 p.m. and say, "Saint Teresa, I can't take it anymore. Carry me." And she carries them, always, without exception. The only way not to be carried is not to ask, because Saint Teresa respects freedom. She doesn't force. She waits to be invited. And when she's invited, she comes down. And when she comes down, she never goes back alone. She always goes up with someone on her back. And then Padre Pio looked at the friar and said, "Tell this to the world. Don't let this secret die with me, because Saint Teresa told me that in the last times, depression will be the spiritual epidemic. It will kill more than wars. It will destroy more than diseases, because depression kills the soul before it kills the body, and when the soul dies, the person continues breathing, but they're not alive. They're a spiritual living dead. And Saint Teresa is the only one who can resurrect those dead, because she herself has been at rock bottom. And she knows the way back. Padre Pio died on September 23rd, 1968, and the friar who heard those words kept the secret for 10 years. But in 1978, he decided to tell it. And since then, thousands of people around the world have done the spiritual practice, and thousands have been healed, and each of those people told another, and the chain continues. You are now part of this chain. You aren't here by accident. You're here because it's your time. It's your time to offer the rose. It's your time to say yes. It's your time to ascend this stairway. So, I ask you, will you engage in this spiritual practice today at 3 p.m., or will you procrastinate and delay it? Or will you yield to doubt? Or will you test its validity? Because if you postpone it, you might not get another chance this year. And a year in the depths is far too long. If you doubt, you sever the lifeline before Saint Teresa can reach you. If you test, you transform an act of faith into a mere experiment, and experiments don't unlock spiritual gateways. Faith unlocks, surrender unlocks, holy desperation unlocks. So choose now, before doubt resurfaces, before fear overwhelms you, before pride whispers that you don't need this. You do need this, and it's okay to need. To need is human. And humility is what Saint Teresa seeks. So be humble, offer the rose, recite the prayer, and wait. Await the 15 days, and on the 15th day when you awaken free, you'll know that Saint Teresa descended. You'll know she found you in the depths. You'll know she carried you up on her back, and you will never be the same. Now go find the white rose. Go print the image of Saint Teresa. Prepare yourself for 3 p.m. And when the bell tolls, when the hour arrives, kneel and say yes. Yes to Saint Teresa. Yes to the path. Yes to ascension. Because Saint Teresa is waiting for you. For 15 days, for 15 years, however long you've been in the depths, she is waiting, and today is the day. Today at 3 p.m., it is her day to descend, and for you to allow yourself to be carried. And if you completed the spiritual practice, if you offered the rose, leave a comment. I offered the rose, or simply, Teresa. Because when you comment, you're planting your flag. You're publicly stating, I choose to believe, I choose to ascend, and that public declaration holds spiritual power. Because the adversary thrives in secrecy, in silence, in shame. But when you declare publicly, you break its power. You proclaim, I'm not ashamed to need Saint Teresa. I'm not ashamed of being in the depths. I'm not ashamed to ask to be carried. And Saint Teresa honors that courage. She honors those who aren't afraid to say, I need help. So comment now, before you leave this video, because the comment is your public commitment. It's you saying to Saint Teresa, to me, to yourself, I will do it. Not maybe, not if I have time, but I will do it. Today, at 3 p.m. And when you comment, you become part of the chain, part of the miracle, part of the army of souls that Saint Teresa is rescuing from the depths. And together you will ascend, one pulling the other, one witnessing to the other, until all reach the summit, until all are at peace.